We need to talk about that Nintendo Switch 2 Direct because there is a lot to unpack. Nintendo really needed to do their big one with the next installment of the Mario Kart franchise, and oh boy did they deliver. Mario Kart World was announced as the launch title for the Switch 2 when it drops on June 5th, and to say I was hyped is the understatement of the year. Put it this way, I was already yelling just looking at the flipping roster. We got Pauline, we got Nabbit, we got the cow from Moo Moo Meadows, or Moo Moo Farm if you prefer. And that's before we get into the characters who are literally defying the laws of gravity over here. Because tell me why, I've seen a dry bones fish and one of those spiky wiggler enemies you see in Desert Mario levels pulling up on a motorbike. Even if you've got any hands or feet, what business do you have being on a motorbike? Then you have Mario on the wall, Toad's out here flattening people, and Birdo just casually steals a whole truck. Someone in the chat said we got Mario Kart GTA before GTA 6, and it's kinda true. It's chaos from the very first minute of this trailer, and I love it. And hey, if you too love the chaos of Mario Kart, hit subscribe! Speaking of chaos, that seems to be the theme for this game because there is so much going on. We got official confirmation that there will be 24 players per race, which is going to feel great when you win, but when you're inevitably stuck in the item cluster fluff and a singular red shell makes you go from 3rd to 21st, I can tell you now, it's gonna hurt. It seems like a lot of Mario Kart World centers itself around being exactly that, a world. We're now able to drive off-road and go basically anywhere, join up with friends and take pictures, and in the interest of creating an immersive experience, the tracks will now change depending on the time of day and weather conditions. I just hope to God that those are kind of like preset changes as opposed to being linked to when and where we're playing the game from, because I live in not so sunny England, where the sky is a sad grey most of the time and rain is like our default setting. We've also got a new mode called Knockout Tour where you race from one corner of the world to another, but there's a twist. Along the way you'll hit various checkpoints, but if you're not in a certain position or higher by the time those checkpoints arrive, you're out of there. This is definitely something that I'm personally really looking forward to, and the game as a whole is definitely my cup of tea. Or should that be coffee, because I'm a coffee drinker? They're gonna revoke my British card for that one. No, but seriously, if you ask me if this game was worth getting the Switch 2 for, I'd say yes. Based on what we saw in the Direct, I'd say I would probably get the Switch 2 in order to experience this game. However, and it's a big stinking however, we need to talk about this price tag. $74.99! We're talking nearly 80 great British pounds. Now for reference, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is currently priced at $49.99. Yes, that does go up to $72.48 if you add in the booster course pack, but the difference here is that wasn't the asking price up front for just the base game. Don't get me wrong, right? Mario Kart World definitely looks like impressive, but that's a pretty big jump, and it's also definitely more expensive than most other games out there, even on newer consoles. Now, do I think you'll regret paying for Mario Kart World? Not in the slightest. I'm pretty certain this one's going to be great, but it is just a lot for one game, and I completely understand why some people are hesitant. But anyway, Is that Discord on my Nintendo Switch too? Not quite, although Discord integration would be really cool. No, what we were shown next was Game Chat, a new Switch 2 exclusive feature that would allow us to chat with friends and share our screen directly through the Switch, even if we're playing different games. Now I, for one, am glad they made this something you can only do with people on your friends list. I'd seen the rumours of voice chat kind of flying around, and when I saw an article a few weeks ago that talked about Nintendo applying for a patent surrounding in-game voice chat, I suddenly had visions of Mario Kart and Splatoon very quickly resembling something out of a 2010 COD lobby. Now I think game chat is a cool idea. I think with so many of Nintendo's games moving towards a focus on playing with others, or at least having the ability to, I think it adds some much needed communication options and brings that kind of community element back to the Switch that was missing. One thing though, I really want to see it in action like myself, because as much as they tried, they could not hide how laggy and choppy everyone else's gameplay looked on that Splatoon sector. I don't know if they thought, oh, everyone's going to be looking at the bigger screen up top, they won't notice. I'm so sorry, Nintendo, we noticed. And don't get me wrong, I want this to be good, right? I really do. I want it to be good because I think it's a good idea. I'm actively rooting for Nintendo to make it good. I don't think it will be, or at least not at launch. I think they might make it better further down the line, but I don't think this will be a particularly strong feature at launch. Although it's kind of ironic in a way, because immediately after introducing us to Game Chat and trying to sell us that weird camera attachment to go with it, they go on to talk about how the Switch 2 is going to run at 120 FPS. Now this is going to be great individually. It's going to really enhance our own personal gameplay experiences, and that's amazing. But if I'm sharing my screen, my friends are only seeing the footage at 10 FPS, I might as well not bother, you get me? But you know, while we're on the topic of system upgrades, the Switch 2 does have plenty of them. We've been treated to a bigger 1080p screen which supports HDR and does 4K when docked. I feel like Nintendo have seen all those memes about how games run on the Switch versus other consoles and wanted to put an end to them. And that's all well and good, but if that is the case, they really shouldn't have shown that screen sharing footage. Good news though, we now get 256GB of storage as opposed to the 32 we currently have on the original Switch, which I'm glad about because for some reason digital copies of Switch 2 games appear to be cheaper than their physical counterparts. The new dock also has a built-in fan, which I for one am incredibly thankful for because I have the hottest room in the house. This is obviously great for me in winter, but my original Switch, oh, it hates it. And you know, sometimes even if I'm in a cooler room, certain games have my original Switch fighting for its life. And you know, I know people are going to be like, clean it, I've cleaned it. I've cleaned it a million times, nothing helps. We now get 2 USB ports because they really want you to buy that camera, a new Pro controller which you probably don't need and I definitely won't be getting since the old ones are compatible, and would you look at that? The Joy-Cons are once again drifting, but this is actually a good thing because we've got mouse controls now. With this, they also showed us a new game called Dragon Drive that is entirely focused on getting us to grips with the mouse controls. Now, I'm probably not going to get this one because even though it looks like it'll be fun, I actually just don't know if the whole mouse controls thing is really going to be for me. Being someone who, whether it was Nintendo or PlayStation, never really been into Xbox, has always preferred console gaming, I'd rather not jump straight into getting a game solely focused on the mouse element. However, with all that being said, I do love that they are highlighting wheelchair users and creating a positive representation for them. Disabled people don't really get to see themselves highlighted in any form of media that much, so for a company as big and as influential as Nintendo are to do that, it's a really positive thing and something that I definitely hope we see more of from games companies in the future. Speaking of things designed us to get used to the capabilities of the new Switch, Nintendo have announced Welcome Tour, a game focused around helping us get the most out of our Switch 2. Now, I was rocking with this. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. It's a fun way to do tutorials and let people know more about what the Switch 2 can do. Until they asked for money for it. Hey Alexa, play Greedy by Ariana Grande. No, don't actually do that. I don't want to get copyrighted. As much as I think it's a neat little idea to make something like reading the instructions, an activity that's been boring for all our lives, kind of interesting, this is still a glorified tutorial at the end of the day. You know, I was already unsure about like the amount of money they were trying to ask for Mario Kart World, but I'm gonna go out and say that this is worse. Not because it's gonna cost more or anything. I'm well aware that this will probably cost a fraction of what you're gonna pay for Mario Kart. For me, it's the sheer principle of it. See, this Welcome Tour thing, this is a tutorial, right? It's a tech demo. Mario Kart World might be an expensive game, but at least it is still a game. And you know, I want to have a word with whoever decided to slap a price tag on this one, because in what world, okay, in what world does it make sense for me, having already spent like £400 on a new Switch, to then have to pay an additional cost just to learn how to use it? We were then introduced to the concept of Switch 2 Edition games, which is essentially existing Nintendo Switch games, but better. I don't know how many of these I'll get personally in terms of games I already own. The only one that really jumped out at me was the Kirby and the Forgotten Land one, because that comes with an entire new story called Starcross World, and I am a sucker for any and everything Kirby. Now, I do know that these are dividing opinion, in the sense that some people don't think new content for an already existing game should be locked onto one console if the game already existed on another one. But I'm not gonna lie guys, this has been going on for ages. Gaming companies do this all the time. Nintendo do this all the time. Let's go for the most obvious one. Why do you think Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is called Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? In fact, all 3 of the top selling games on the Wii U were upgraded, given additional content, and slapped on the Switch. Is this in part because the Wii did badly? Yeah, but it's pretty much the same concept. In fact, I'd argue that the Switch 2 Editions thing is slightly better simply because you can at least upgrade that rather than having to buy the entire new game again. While we're talking about new editions, we also got a glimpse at some of the partner games that will be available on the Switch 2, including Elden Ring, which I really don't think anyone was expecting, but one thing's for certain. That's a game that's going to put those Switch 2 upgrades to the test. If it can run Elden Ring and run it well, it will probably run just about anything, which means there's a whole demographic of gamers who are going to need to go find a new joke. Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment was revealed, which I am personally very excited for. I know Age of Calamity divided opinions, but I don't know, I think the game looks cool. Either way, I think we should all be hoping that it's good, because I have a feeling that this is the only new Zelda-based content we're getting for a while. We also saw Deltarune and Silksong, which had the chat going crazy, and for good reason. I have been seeing those two come up in comment sections, in live chats for literal years. It was bad. People were making summoning circles for them. So naturally, when Silk Song finally got shown, it got approximately 2 seconds of screen time, which about half of us watching live completely missed because the stream froze. Now, I, like many others, thought we were about to get a new Smash. I saw the start, I was like, that's Kirby's style, but there's no way it's going to be Kirby because we've already had the Forgotten Land DLC, like, there's no way. So, I was wrong. But you know what? I couldn't be happier. Sorry Smash fans that they baited you, but I will never be mad at more Kirby. Especially since this was Kirby Air Riders, a sequel to what I believe is the highly underappreciated Kirby Air Ride. Now I know there's probably a whole group of people who are mad that this wasn't Smash, but I for one am glad to see Nintendo kind of pushing Kirby more and putting out new Kirby content, because I know it's not as big as your Marios and your Zeldas, but I really do love it. Now if I was convinced that Smash Bros was the previous announcement, I was like doubly, triply convinced that this last announcement was going to be a 3D Mario game. I was like, it's been 8 years since Odyssey came out, it's the only one of those kind of superseller games on the Switch that didn't get a sequel or any major DLC. There's literally nothing else it could be, it's gotta be new 3D Mario. Friends, it wasn't. It wasn't only 3D Mario. Let me tell you something, you can never predict Nintendo. You think they're gonna zig and lo and behold they zag. You see, what it actually was a new 3D Donkey Kong. But hold on, because I am definitely not mad at that. Was it what I was expecting? No, but I am excited because this thing looks good. This game looks like it's going to be good, it's going to be fun, and I can tell you for a fact it's going straight in my basket. While it's not 3D Mario, I am pretty certain it's made by the same team, so I know this game is in good hands. Also, another plus point is that it is less than Mario Kart World. Yeah, it's still $66.99 for a physical copy, but the $58.99 for a digital one is in line with the prices we've already seen for games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom on the original Switch. It is a shame that physical copies do seem to be more expensive, but at least knowing there will still be games available in some way at the price points we're used to seeing on the original Switch does alleviate some of my concerns. I will say though, the reveal of Donkey Kong Bonanza does now make the almost excessive promo of DK Country Returns on the Switch make way more sense. I couldn't wrap my head around for the life of me why Nintendo were pushing and promoting this 15-year-old game so heavily. But obviously now I can see that they had this waiting in their locker and they were trying to probably reintroduce the franchise and just generally get more people interested in Donkey Kong again, since it'd been like 10 years since the last new entry. Now, do I think the Switch 2 is going to be worth the money? Yes. I knew this console was going to be more expensive than the previous one because quite frankly, everything is. You'd be hard pressed to find something being sold for less than it was 8 years ago. Plus, the price point for the Switch 2 as a console itself is very much in line with the likes of PlayStation and Steam Deck for what's being offered. The thing I'm not loving as much is the cost specifically of the physical editions of the games. Those are definitely being priced at a higher point than most other games on the market right now, but the digital versions are being set at a more competitive price. You know, this is the first time as far as I know that Nintendo have done a launch bundle where the only option is the digital version. And if you want a physical copy, you have to buy the game and the console separately. I do think the games look great though. Based on what we've seen from Nintendo themselves and what we've seen from the partner games, I think the Switch 2 is going to have a pretty strong lineup for its first few months. I know I've seen a lot of people like, oh, but there's only one first party game at launch, and I get that. Like, the biggest draw of getting a Nintendo console is for those exclusive Nintendo games. But to be fair, it's actually not that different from when the Switch 1 rolled out. On actual launch day, your first party options were Breath of the Wild or 1-2-Switch, and 1-2-Switch has only sold like 3.7 million copies throughout its entire life, so I know most people only got Breath of the Wild at launch. Contrary to popular belief, even Mario Kart 8 Deluxe wasn't there on launch. It actually had the same type of release schedule that Donkey Kong Bonanza is going to have, and actually came out about a month later. So in terms of should you get the console at launch, I'd say look at the partnered games we've seen announced, because they will, for the first few months, be the majority of your options. If you've already played a lot of them somewhere else, or they're just kind of not appealing to you, then maybe you might want to hold off for a little bit. See, I have a feeling that Nintendo are holding on to some of their big first party games like Animal Crossing, and they'll probably show us them later in the year because they want to do a big push over Christmas, so I anticipate we might see them like September for the traditional September Direct. Oh, and of course there is also the new set of GameCube classics coming to the Switch 2 through the Switch Online expansion pack, and that does include the long-awaited Wind Waker. These will be exclusive to the console, so if you're looking for more Nintendo stuff to play when the Switch 2 first drops, this may provide you with another option. Speaking of other options, if you enjoyed this video then be sure to check out the one on screen now, and hit subscribe while you're at it. But most importantly, stay positive, stay smiling, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!